Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and this is going to be my 8.3 Ny'alotha Warlock Raid review. In it, we'll be covering the specs and builds that I feel will be best for each fight and why I feel that way. If you're interested in acquiring any weak auras or add-ons you see here, I'll place a link to my Twitch in the description where you can acquire them all. Let's jump right into it and start off with everyone's favorite dragon, Wrathion. Okay, now we're looking at Wrathion, which is the first boss of Ny'alotha. It's a single target fight, the majority of the fight. In Phase 2, there are 3 assassin adds that spawn, as well as a handful of pillars you need to kill, but the majority of this fight, we're going to be dealing most of your damage, is Phase 1 and the single target portion of the fight. The Burning Cataclysm mechanic essentially teleports Wrathion across the room and pushes the raid essentially across the room, out of range of Wrathion. Now, as demonology here, you're not going to be able to get a whole lot of value as far as dot applications go. Destro can roll Immolate, but Affliction can get full value here, playing its single target build with Siphon Life. Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, Haunt, potentially a Singularity, and a few UAs dumped into Wrathion can keep some damage flowing while the raid is on the other part of the room. There's a decent bit of movement on this fight. It depends a lot on RNG, as there are a few debuffs you need to get out of the raid with, and the main mythic mechanic here is that there's a debuff that is applied to a player whenever you move, decreasing your movement speed by a certain percentage, and it does indeed, if it caps out, permanently reduce your movement speed to 100%, to the point where you can't move at all. The good thing here, as Warlocks, we can simply use Demonic Circle to clear this debuff, as Demonic Circle clears slow snares, things like that, and get out of it very easily. So there's not really a whole lot we have to worry about here. Most classes typically have one way or another to clear the debuff or get around it, but as Warlocks here, pretty much when your Demonic Circle's off CD, know that you can indeed clear the buff here pretty easily. My choice here, overall, I feel it's going to be Affliction single target build running Siphon Life. I don't think Destro is bad here single target wise, and you can get a bit more value in a sense burst damage wise on the Assassins in Phase 2, and the Pillars in a sense with Immolation Aura in Phase 2, but the worthwhile damage on Wrathion in Phase 1, I'd say Affliction gets the nod here. Skitra's a really interesting fight, because on Heroic, every single Shred Psyche debuff that goes out onto a player, which spawns an add or two depending on your raid size, can be seen and hit by the entire raid. And the same goes for the actual Images of Absolution in Phase 2, which is essentially the moving wall that you want to dodge as a raid. When you get to Mythic, however, when the boss is pulled, certain members of the raid are either given the Clouded Mind or Twisted Mind debuffs, essentially only being able to see adds that are spawned by a player with the same debuff as far as like the Shred Psyche ads go. The same technically is also the case for the ads in Phase 2, whether they spawn in the Clouded Mind or Twisted Mind realms. So this on Heroic is a very strong Flashpoint rolling Havoc destruction fight. The ads spawn every 30 seconds or so roughly, which is great for Havoc CDs or your Havoc CD, Cataclysm, things like that. You can get an insane amount of destruction Havoc value here. As far as Mythic goes, though, there's a lot of RNG in this fight. There were times we tested it and killed it on PTR that I did not see a single ad the entire pull. So if I was playing Rolling Havoc, like the Shred Psyche ads, so if I was playing Rolling Havoc here, or Flashpoint most of the time, which I was for a handful of pulls, I got no value. I had anywhere from 3 to 5 dead azerite trades, completely dead. And there were pulls where I saw almost every ad spawn, like both the Images of Absolution as well as the Shred Psyche ads. So it's a really heavy RNG based fight. What I'm planning on doing right now, and what I feel is going to be the best bet heading into Mythic progression, which most of this video is based off of, even though you can typically apply it for Heroic as well. I'm going to look at initially playing a single target destruction build here. I think a lot of people have forgotten that regardless of playing Rolling Havoc stacks or not, destruction or traits or not, destruction is still really strong when it comes to two target cleave with Havoc. Seeing as how, yes, the ads, if they spawn in your realm every single time, you're going to get an insane amount of value there. But if they don't, you're playing multiple dead Rolling Havoc pieces. So my plan is to go in, like I said, single target-wise Destro and try and get as much Havoc value, not Rolling Havoc value, actual raw Havoc value as possible here. Once again, you do need to coordinate with the other group who cannot see the Images of Absolution. The moving wall adds later on in the fight to stand in certain parts of the room to not be hit by them. You can actually proc Flashpoint and get Rolling Havoc stacks off the Images of Absolution as well, I guess technically heading into Phase 2 or the split phases here. Keep in mind that the images do eventually need to be killed. Once they make a full pass back to where they started, they can be killed. Any spell will essentially one-shot them. So if you want to get your Havoc value there, your Rolling Havoc value there more so, you want to attack them when they spawn, as well as apply your Immolate typically when they spawn for your Flashpoint uptime. I don't think Affliction's bad here. Once again, typically most fights that Destruction's strong on, Affliction's pretty strong on too, because they have similar yet relatively different toolkits, depending what you're looking for here. If you have a really strong single target AF build and not necessarily a strong Destro single target build, I think AF is more than fine here. I don't think this is a very good demonology fight. I don't think most of the fights in this raid are very good demonology fights. Some have more value than others, but looking at this fight's damage profile, just mechanics, and the actual toolkit that Destro and AF bring to this fight, I think Destro's a great choice here, and AF is AF's not too bad either. Maut is going to be the second or third boss you encounter in a raid, depending on if your guild wants to go to Skitra second or Maut itself. It's once again mostly a single target boss. There will be adds that spawn semi-frequently, but they don't spawn frequently enough where you get good rolling havoc value here as Destruction, or Flashpoint to the same extent here. Phase 1 is mostly, besides killing the adds, a single target burn phase in a sense, a push phase, boss-wise. There are going to be random pools that spawn on the ground, which you'll have to get out of the raid and drop. However, when the boss does his large AoE-based ability, you want to shift into those pools, thus taking no damage from the boss's AoE, and then get back out of them once the AoE is over. The interesting part here is Phase 2, because the boss essentially gains a pseudo-spell reflect. Now, Affliction and Destruction are, at this point, going to deal more single-target damage than Demonology. In Ny'alotha, barring any buffs or buffs to Demonology or nerfs to the other two specs. The thing here in Phase 2, I played Destro, AF, and Demo on PTR testing this boss. Affliction and Destruction, there was a decent bit of spell reflect damage you're taking. There were times where my Infernal lined up with Phase 2, but I really couldn't pop it because if I was getting later into a Supremacy window with cooldowns and everything, I was going to almost one-shot myself, if not one-shot myself. Affliction's damage, reflect damage, was a bit more... it wasn't as sporadic. It was a bit smoother in a sense because a lot of her dots are dealing damage, but I was still taking a good bit of reflect damage playing AF here. When it came to this fight, though, this is one of the fights where technically I feel Demonology does gain a bit of ground here, because with Soul Link and things like that, I could full-on Tyrant the boss, blast CDs, everything, and take really no damage at all in Phase 2. Now, you can make the case, and this is probably a pretty good case for this fight, just have your healer stack CDs and coordinate them and everything, so the raid's not taking a whole lot of damage here, but that probably will end up being the play. I mean, that is the way the fight is intended to work. But Demonology does have a bit more merit here, in a sense, with this damage profile and toolkit that it has. Overall, truthfully here, I'm probably going to end up playing Affliction, potentially Destro, because you can get some actual Havoc value on the adds, even though we're not going to be playing Rolling Havoc or Flashpoint here, barring a weird strategy coming along, off-tanking the adds permanently for the whole fight. I think this is a solid AF fight. I'm going to most likely end up playing Affliction single target build with Siphon Life here, but I wouldn't necessarily fault somebody for playing Destro if you wanted to. Just be much more aware of the Phase 2 spell reflect and the extra movement you might have in the fight depending on debuffs.
Oh, we procced.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Dark Inquisitor is a niche. It's another interesting fight, similar to Skitra in a sense. It's mostly a single target fight. However, when the actual orb spawns, which 3 players need to go down and knock the orb from one portal into another, every time a player comes in contact with an orb, on Mythic it spawns an add that has a cast, which is essentially an AoE damage and fear effect that needs to be interrupted. The issue here is that you can't really control the speed the orb is moving at, so players that are knocking the orb need to hit it as precisely as possible to minimize the amount of adds they're spawning, essentially in the downstairs phase or so. There were times in PTO we were testing where we had 5, 6, 7 adds alive and we died. We couldn't interrupt every single fear, and we fell behind and died. There's a lot of movement on this fight too, a lot of semi-sporadic periodic movement. There's an add that spawns, which essentially is a copy of you, like the actual player, and you have to shift away from it, where it deals proximity damage. At the same time, there are ground-based effects, which are like shadow slices on the ground. Typically, the first and second out of the 3 pulses is much faster than the third, but the third is typically a bit larger. So there's a lot of movement here. AF can take good advantage of this fight by just refreshing dots in the move, casting things in the move, things like that. However, when it comes to the add, the spawn, and the downstairs realm, Destruction's Havoc toolkit, I didn't say Rolling Havoc, but Havoc toolkit can get a lot. It gains a lot of value here. You're not going. I don't think personally you're going to play Rolling Havoc traits here. I think it's a pretty bad idea because the adds don't spawn anywhere near frequently enough to get Havoc basically on CD when it comes off CD again, which you're losing a lot of Rolling Havoc value there if you can't. Like I said, it's mostly a single target fight. I do feel like Destro, like I said, has a lot of value here single target wise, and then you can get value in those Havoc windows when said adds spawn. once again, Destro was not very mobile compared to Affliction here, and Ath, you can just play an ID trait here, build some stacks in the actual boss, and when the downstairs phase starts, typically blast an ad down with a big ID drain, as well as CDs depending on where things are. I think both are solid choices here. I would typically look to play Destro's single target azerite trait build here, and Siphon Life for Affliction as well. Once again, Demonology, unfortunately, is just not really in a very good spot with this fight. It's a bit more mobile than Destro here, but just toolkit-wise, looking at this fight's mechanics, it's not really where I want to be from a mythic progression standpoint. I'm probably going to end up starting as Affliction here. We had Warlocks testing it both as Ath and Destro on PTR, and Ath did end up pulling ahead here, at least from our testing, a bit. You technically can Shard Snipe these ads, however, they die pretty quickly, and they're to the point where they're infrequent enough where I still feel that the single target Deathbolt build of Affliction is probably going to be the choice here, and at least where I start for Mythic Progression on Dark Inquisitor Zanish.
5, 4,
Okay.
3,
Hivemind.
1.
Now, I have said it multiple times on stream and here, if this is going to be a big Destro tier. We've already talked about Destro on a few fights. This, in my opinion, is the first fight we've seen as far as the boss we talked about, which is the big Rolling Havoc, one of the big Rolling Havoc Flashpoint fights of the tier, when Destro starts to ramp up a good bit. This is a perma 2-target cleave fight. You can always make great use of Havoc here, essentially Rolling Havoc here as well. Both bosses are active and essentially need to die at the same time. They have a pseudo heal, similar to Queen's Court as well. There are also priority ads to spawn, darter ads that need to be killed within a reasonable amount of time, as well as a lot of small ads, which you can make great use of. DK grips here, Demon Hunter, Sigil of Change, to mass grip them, and AoE them all down with a Rain of Fire, a Cataclysm, depending on what you're doing here. The problem, they have added Rolling Havoc traits to the raid. We have Shoulders of Rolling Havoc from Carapace of N'Zoth, and I believe a helm, a chest? It's a chest from Wrathion. So we're lacking an actual helm. For initial heroic progression, obviously I'll pretty much be using my old azerite from, EP the first week or so. So we'll play Flashpoint Rolling Havoc here. When it comes to Mythic Prog, this is a big Rolling Havoc fight. Big. You can get an insane amount of Rolling Havoc value here in this fight. The question is, if you're playing Destro here, is Memory of Lucid Dreams as a major better, or Vision of Perfection? Lucid Dreams brings that consistency on a 2-minute CD, which VOP doesn't. VOP, however, brings that RNG chance of having larger, bigger Supremacy windows by your VOP-based Infernals, extending it more, having Supremacy in your Havoc windows, as well as Immolation Auras, raw damage, and there are a lot of ads on this fight. It's a pretty fun fight. It's going to be interesting, because you can acquire Rolling Havoc pieces from the actual Residium vendor and get 2 in the raid, but depending on your set heading into this fight, even if you don't have Rolling Havoc, well, let's say if you don't have like a solid Rolling Havoc build here or any traits at all, Ath gains a lot of ground here. This is a relatively specific, I feel, Destro fight. If you have the Rolling Havoc traits, awesome. The Flashpoint traits, great. The One Crashing trait, awesome. You're going to crank this fight. If you don't have any Rolling Havoc traits at all at a worthwhile eye level, and your gear is actually outscaling your EP Rolling Havoc gear to that point, which is probably going to be an argument in itself. If you have old EP, Rolling Havoc, Flashpoint, Crashing gear, it might even be worth wearing here for initial prog. If you don't have anything like that for Ny'alotha gear, eye level wise, I would look towards playing Ath here. Typically, like I said, a lot of the fights where Destro is pretty good, guess what? Ath is good too, because they do similar things pretty well, but also bring different damage profiles to certain fights. When I played this fight as Destro, I played a single target build with VOP. VOP is more inconsistent than Lucid Dreams, but while Lucid brings that much more consistency with your 2-minute Infernals. But if you're going after those large, insanely high, long duration-based Supremacy windows that big damage, VOP is what you're going to want to play here. If you're going for more consistency, which is a lot of what progression is about, I think Lucid Dreams is a solid play here. But keep in mind that on 2-target cleave Rolling Havoc-based fights, VOP gains even more ground because of the extra Supremacy windows you get. More Infernals, more Shard Gen, more Crashing Chaos procs, things like that. If I was playing Affliction here, I would play our Absolute Corruption build, at least start off with that. I played Siphon and AC and PTR, we tested it. There's a lot of ads spawning here, a lot of priority ads, target swapping, so I feel AC was where I would want to start here. Besides that, just playing Rack and Cascading, ID traits are really strong here because of there being multiple targets, and just go from there. I don't think it's a very complicated fight. It's a really fun fight, but if I have the right Azerite build, I'm certainly going to play Destruction here with Rolling Havoc, Flashpoint, and Crashing Chaos.
5, 4.
Shad'Har's another great fight this tier, and probably one of my favorite fights as far as Ny'alotha goes. It's funny because it's a patchwork fight, but it's pretty good. It's the single target patchwork boss of the tier, similar to Fetid Devourer, other patchwork bosses we've seen in the past. It's a pretty fun fight. Phase 1 is 100 to 66%, Phase 2 is 66 to 33%, and Phase 3 is 33 to 0, obviously, with a pseudo enrage in a sense, just with the actual Phase 3 mechanic. In testing, I played Demo, Destro, and Af here. Demo was fine. It's fine. I played the VOP Major build, and there are a few other builds emerging as far as Majors go right now. But consistency-wise, once again, playing the VOP Major build of Demonology, it just really wasn't there. Sometimes you get the right Tyrant procs, and you're percents ahead of the next highest player in damage. Then sometimes you get no procs, and congratulations, you're dealing 5k more damage than the tanks. You don't want that inconsistency when it comes to progression. You really don't. Which is unfortunate because Demonology is a fun spec to play, but this is the world we live in. I played Destro on this fight. There's a lot of semi-frequent movement. Honestly, in each phase. Phase 2 is soaking orbs. Phase 3 with ground effects. And Phase 1 with a different kind of ground effect you have to shift out of pretty quickly, as well as the frontal breath that the actual boss deals. Affliction can typically negate most of that movement, just refreshing dots on the move. My plan here on Mythic Shad'Har is to start off as Affliction with a single target build, Rack and Cascading ID traits if I have them, and just go from there. I don't think Destro's terrible here, although you're not going to get any Havoc value at all. It's pretty much just a single target fight. My plan is to start as Af here, playing Siphon Life. As far as talents go, we did talk a bit about execute fights being giving Drain Soul more value, because Deathbolt did end up simming as our highest 15 level talent row trait talent here. Drain Soul on this fight though is an execute in a sense, and seeing how Phase 3 is a tight enrage, essentially there's a green mass that spawns in the center of the room, and it grows slowly to the outer edge of the room. If you come in contact with this, you die. You can't stand in it for 10 seconds and die. No, you just straight up die. It hits really hard. So it's a pseudo enrage in a sense. Drain Soul could gain a lot of value here. I think this is a pretty decent Drain Soul fight. Also taking into account the semi-frequent Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3 movement when it comes to playing Deathbolt, or I guess Nightfall would technically be an option here, which is something a lot of people cite as far as a pretty good movement-based talent if there's like a heavy movement fight as Affliction. The thing is, playing Drain Soul gives you periodic damage ticks throughout the actual channel, right? Versus, playing Deathbolt and having to cast Shadowbolt. Okay, well, I'm casting a Shadowbolt, but I have to move. Here comes the mechanic. I'm going to get hit by it. Well, cancel that cast. When you're playing Nightfall, you still cast Shadowbolt. You don't have Drain Soul when you take Nightfall. So you're still casting your Shadowbolts as your filler. The thing is, yes, if you get the right Nightfall proc at the right time, you can cast that instant cast Shadowbolt on the move. That's great. But if you get that proc 4 seconds before the movement is coming, you're not going to sit there AFK. Oh, I'm going to hold this time move. It's not going to happen. You're going to cast it as soon as you can. You're not going to hold that proc. So I think that school of thought is sort of flawed when it comes to Nightfall being a great movement trait, because RNG, it doesn't scale with multiple targets. I've had back-to-back Nightfall procs, literally, and there's times I've gone 2 minutes without one proc. So, seeing as how Drain Soul is a pretty strong execute here, can bring that periodic damage where before you have to shift out of a mechanic, I'm going to look more towards playing a Drain Soul build of Affliction here. Siphon Life, everything else. If you're going to play Destro here, it's fine. Know that you're going to move a decent bit. So make good use of your circles, your conflict charges, things like that. And I played Destro's just single target build. Alright, now when we get the Drest'agath, things start to get interesting for the last 6 or so bosses of this tier. Now, Drest'agath is a fight where it might appear that Flashpoint Rolling Havoc Destruction is insane here, but when it comes to progression, that's not really the case, because you want to be killing these tentacles spaced out, typically, barring degenerate strategies emerging, with spaced out. You're not having the entire raid just spread amongst different tentacles without any actual coordination here. When we did our actual raid testing, we had the raid split typically on one tentacle in the back, one in the front, one to each side or so. Because whenever you kill the tentacles, they drop orbs in the ground. Coming in contact with one gives you a debuff, which lasts 30 seconds, which allows all the damage you deal to the boss to actually be dealt to him. Any damage he takes outside of players that have that debuff, the boss instantly heals back, well, within 5 seconds or so. So there's a lot to take into account in this fight. Destro, the actual debuff lasts 30 seconds, which is the full duration of a supremacy window as destruction. So you can get a lot of value in there. The thing is, there's a decent bit of movement on this fight with the actual tentacles pulsing in AoE, with eye beams coming out, things like that. So damage profiles are a bigger thing here than people realize. Flashpoint rolling havoc, you can get flashpoint value in that window, which is awesome, but this is not a... I personally feel, from a progression standpoint, this is not a big rolling havoc fight. A lot of your 2-target cleave in this fight is going to be irrelevant, unless you can carry over that large intellect buff with rolling havoc into the boss, CD-wise. I guess technically into another ad is okay, but you're losing a lot of that 2-target cleave damage. It's irrelevant. It's a waste. You'd be better off playing, in my opinion, if you're going to play Destro, a single-target-esque build here, probably working in some flashpoint traits potentially. And blasting the boss when you have your CDs every 2 minutes with your Infernal. You gain a lot more value there. As far as AF goes in this fight, I played AF for a lot of testing here. It's probably where I'm going to start on this fight. I played Absolute Corruption for this fight, but once again, Absolute Corruption sort of puts you in a weird spot where it feels like you're sort of padding. I mean, you can put AC on some tentacles and things, and the damage is not totally irrelevant, right? If you're going back to them later on and killing them at a certain point. But if you're trying to get that 30-second damage window in, which your Dark Lair is very good at doing, setting up and blasting the boss when you get the actual debuff from the tentacles, I feel Siphon Life might end up being the play here. I think this is more so a single-target fight in disguise. When you're looking at this fight from a demonology perspective, Demo does have, with VOP Major or Minor, a 1 minute, 10-second or so Tyrant, which essentially means you can go, if you get debuff, Tyrant the boss, go kill a tentacle or so, maybe 2 tentacles later, get the buff, Tyrant the boss again. So Demo's damage profile is valuable here. But as far as the spec I think gains the most value here, I'm going to start off personally probably playing a single target build of Affliction. There's a chance I might end up playing AC, we'll see. But certainly I would like to have 1 or 2 inevitable demise traits here. You can get a lot of ID stacks here, rolling Agony on 2 targets, 3 targets or so. And then when you get that debuff, blast the boss with a 2-stack, 3-stack of ID will deal a lot of damage to the actual boss. In a semi-similar form to how like Mythic Unat was, harvesting resources from surrounding ads, and then blasting the boss down with large drains, things like that.
5, 4, 3, 2.
All right.
1.
Now, when it comes to Mythic Il'gynoth, or just Il'gynoth in general, it's once again a fight that depends a lot on your strategy, what your guild's going to be doing here. There are a decent bit of ads that spawn later into the fight, and Il'gynoth potentially, depending on interrupts and things, the blood ads. However, on PTR, a while back when testing, probably a month and a half ago or so, these ads could be rooted. And in my most recent testing of Il'gynoth and PTR, they could be feared, horrified, stunned. I wasn't able to test if they were able to be rooted or not. But depending on what your guild wants to do here, this might seem like a multi-target Flashpoint rolling havoc base fight for Destro. If your guild is CCing most of the actual blood ads, this is a pseudo single target fight. Phase 1, you kill Drest'agath, Il'gynoth, burn him down. He goes underground, and the 3 eyes of Il'gynoth ever spawn around the room. The thing is, you cannot split the raid off to kill 2 at once, 3 at once. When the first one hits 0, the other 2 go back, and Il'gynoth spawns again. And when you go back into phase 2 again, a second time, the other 2 have healed back to full. So it's important to keep that in mind. As far as Affliction goes here, you might be thinking, okay, let's play Absolute Corruption, put Corruptions on all the ads. When they go down, they'll come back up at a lower health. They come back up at full health regardless, and your AC is actually cleared whenever you go back into phase 1 from phase 2. The actual AC that you put on, if you're playing AC, the actual corruption that you put on the mob you killed in phase 2 will stay there, but it's dead. It's useless pad damage in a sense. So outside of that, if your guild is CCing the bloods and not really worrying a whole lot about them, then this is a pseudo single target fight. You can get some havoc value in phase 2 if you want to like go, put a havoc on an ad. an irrelevant ad like the middle eye ad versus the left and right one, which you're killing first typically. You can proc Flashpoint off of it, but the damage that you deal to it is irrelevant unless you're trying to generate rolling havoc stacks and Flashpoint and things like that, which is okay. But then you go back to phase 1 and you're essentially just you have dead traits in the boss, unless you're killing certain bloods along the way, which then you gain a lot of Flashpoint rolling havoc value here too. So once again, this fight's interesting. It depends a lot what your guild wants to do in this fight. I'm probably going to start off playing AF here. Our single target build of AF with Siphon Life, ID, Inevitable Demise. There is a lot of value here potentially to Drain Soul as well, depending on if your guild is killing bloods or not, because you can shard snipe a lot of them, pump back into the boss. The execute damage is relevant in the sense for later parts of the fight, but it really depends what your guild is doing. If you're planning on rooting most of all the ads, just eventually killing them in one big burst or whatever later on, it's not really worth it. I'd rather play a single target build. But if you're killing them later on, or just killing them as you go, then a Flashpoint rolling havoc build with Destro seems like a pretty solid choice. And the same can be said for just the single target build of AF, or even the AC build of AF. If your guild's killing them, you can corruption an ad and dot it and half AFK it, and it should die, as well as getting a few other cleave based abilities hitting it from Boomkins, Shadow Priest, or locks in the raid. They shouldn't take too long to die. You sort of have to wait and see. But this is certainly going to be a difficult yet exciting fight for the tier. I'm excited for Mythic Ny'alotha. Now, when I said there's the potential to play Demonology on a few fights in Ny'alotha, Vexiona was one of those fights where I felt I feel we have a chance of maybe playing Demo here. As far as Destro goes in this fight, playing the Rolling Havoc Flashpoint build here, you're going to get an insane amount of value phase 1, phase 2. You have frequent ad spawning through random portals the boss spawns, as well as a large ad being present on pull when you pull the boss. The thing is, when you hit phase 3, 40% to 0, it's a pseudo single target burn phase. You don't have any ads to cleave onto, no ways to proc your Flashpoint, so you have dead azerite traits as Destro, Flashpoint, Rolling Havoc. As far as Affliction goes here, it was sort of a headache playing it on PTR. I played a single target build of Destro for a while here. I eventually swapped to AC because of the ad being present for a while. The boss and multiple small ad spawning. But once again, later on, 40 to 0, you would get more value playing Siphon Life here. ID, once again, was a great trade here as far as AF goes. But I just felt that, when you wanted that priority burst damage, you really didn't have it with AF, which follows suit with how the class plays, unless you had a max ID drain going into, the smaller priority ad spawning or the large ad or trying to push the boss at a certain point. When I say Demonology feels good here, in a sense, it does. Once again, one of the main strong points of Demonology is its damage profile. Playing VOP in a major or minor gives you essentially a 1 minute tyrant. It's like a minute 9, minute 10, I believe, CD-wise. Which lines up well with large ad spawns, every other priority ad spawn, I believe, coming out of the portals, as well as not really losing any value when you hit 40 to 0, which is the single target burn phase. You have to keep in mind, Biosquirt Bombers is a 30-second CD. Demonic Strength is a 1 minute CD, but you can still get a lot of value in all the ads we have cleave-wise here. And the thing is, you're casting your hand of cooldowns regardless. If you're playing an EP build, then hey, you'll be imploding, so that's the thing regardless. But it reminds me a lot of Zakul, in a sense, where you needed that bursty damage every minute and a half or so, like we had when we killed both Echoes as Demonology on Zakul progression, as well as having that pseudo-stacked AoE cleave, which if you tank the boss near the ads, or just, AoE the ads in general with Hand of Cooldown cleave, Implosion, Bombers, or Demonic Strength, and just Destro's or Demo's Toolkit as a whole, you get a lot of value there without losing a whole lot in the final phase. In the end, we'll see how things go with Vexiona. I feel like it's a tough call because I played Destro a lot for a lot of Vexiona testing on PTR. I feel like you're probably it's really tough. This is one of the few fights I'm just not sure. I think there's merit to all three specs. It's going to be one you have to get in and really just test a lot with, well, as long as it takes, depending on tuning, to get a better feel for. I really feel like I might start with Demonology here, even though Demo is not looking very great this year as far as damage, everything goes. The raid utility that it brings for this fight is strong. Those ads do need to die pretty quickly, and you're not losing a lot of value later on with, with playing Demo Azerite traits. And I guess the same can be said for AF. You're playing Cascading Calamity, Racking Brilliance, ID, mostly a single target build, maybe with AC, but still, it's a hard call. I feel like I'm probably honestly going to start off potentially trying to play Demonology here, But if it's not working out pretty quickly, I'll probably end up swapping to Af or Destro.
Are we resetting or no?
5,
Now, continuing with the trend of bosses being
Are we going?
a bit interesting and not really having one spec set in place when it comes to actual later bosses in the raid, Wrathion is a pretty spicy boss. On Mythic, you actually have 3 orbs to deal with instead of 2, so you have 2 different abilities to essentially deal with on top of one another versus 1 on Heroic. The interesting thing about Wrathion is that there's a lot of frequent ag cleave in Phase 1 until you hit the 40% barrier going into Phase 2, where it's a pseudo single target burn phase in a sense.
We're not.
Flashpoint, Rolling Havoc Destruction can get a lot of value here. Typically, whenever your actual Havoc comes off CD, you have an add up to get it back on CD. There's that much cleave in this fight. A lot of ads spawn frequently enough where you can get a pretty decent Flashpoint uptime in this fight. So I'd look towards, if you're trying to like pad Phase 1 in a sense, then Rolling Havoc Flashpoint is going to be really strong. But when you get to the later phase, 40% to 0, and there's no ads really to cleave onto, then you're playing with dead azerite traits in a sense. Looking at Affliction here, Af gets a lot of value playing Inevitable Demise, the azerite trait, as well as just cleaving onto ads and things as much as you can regardless. When I tested this fight on PTR, on Heroic, and then Mythic, I played the normal single target build of Affliction, playing Siphon Life. Typically, unless it was a really, really strong high priority ad, which a handful of them are here, but some of them there's a bit more leeway than others, I'd throw an Agony or two, an Agony, maybe an 8, maybe a Corruption on it, and sort of let it go. Having so many ads present for just such a long duration in this fight means you have a really high amount of ID stacks in this fight. You can drain a whole lot, which might not be the best later on in Phase 2 on Mythic when you're going to kill yourself when you hit full health, but it's still a really strong option here. You can get a lot of value Phase 1, a lot of utility, burning down priority ads with drains, things like that, as well as going into Phase 2 when it's a pseudo single target burn phase from 40 to 0. Af doesn't really lose much value there at all because ID is still a strong single target trait, and Af is still Af, which has very strong single target CDs just on a 3-minute CD. So, as far as prog goes here initially, I'm betting on, and I'm probably myself at least going to look at starting with playing single target Affliction here. I wouldn't necessarily fault you for playing Destro here. The Rolling Havoc Flashpoint builds, as far as like ag control, solid damage in Phase 1, it's going to be there. But like I said, when you get into the final phase, similar to the Rolling Havoc Flashpoint builds on Mythic Ashara, we've seen as far as padding and parsing things go, congratulations, you have 5 dead azerite traits. So you'll have to sort of find the middle ground there, see what works best for you, and just move on from there.
I'll take that.
Okay,
I'll take that.
Carapace of N'Zoth,
Decent procs.
the penultimate boss of the tier.
Not bad.
Similar to Vexiona in a sense, there's a lot of merit to playing Af, Destro, and even Demo here, in a sense. However, I feel you're probably going to end up on either Affliction or Destruction. When we tested this fight on PTR, we only tested it one time. We didn't get any mythic testing of this fight. It was a long fight. It was like a 10-11 minute fight. There's a lot going on this fight. Outside Phase 1, there's a tentacle ad that spawns, I believe, every minute or so. It needs to be burst down, as well as semi-frequent ads spawning around the room need to be killed. There's a tentacle that will slam across the room, which you essentially have to climb on top of and kill the little ads or cysts that spawn on top of it. Thus, once killing them, they stop spawning the ads that run around on the ground. When I played Demonology here, I had a terrible time with pet pathing AI. It felt really bad. Even when I was playing Demonic Strength as well. When I swapped to Bombers, I got a bit more cleave on this tentacle and like stacked ads in a sense, but it still felt really odd as Demo here. Just with the pet pathing pet AI and just the way CD's lined up, you will have a higher neck here, so a shorter CD on your Tyrant and stuff, but Tyrant always felt like it was like 15 seconds off where we wanted it to be as far as having every priority ad that spawned. Affliction felt fine. I played AC on this fight for testing, and the interesting thing with AC is when you leave the Phase 1 area, head further into the actual boss, into like the inside area before you reach the final boss outside, there are assists along the path and on the walls and things, which are very similar to Gahoon. Also similar to the assist and visions you'll see in Stormwind, which when you hit them, the surrounding area that deals damage around them shrinks down. When we were playing Absolute Corruption here, if you put it on the actual assist, it would shrink the circle down, and it wouldn't grow back how it did on Gahoon. You had to hit it multiple times to shrink it down again. It would just stay small. So that's a huge plus to having Affliction here, or playing Affliction here. there's priority damage in certain ads too. You can line things up sort of well. When you get outside later on, it's a boss, just killing the final boss and things. Obviously, AF, single target CDs, playing ID, things like that, gain a lot of value there. You can probably potentially hold like a large ID stack from inside, heading outside, and get a little bit of extra value there. But there are a lot of targets present on this fight, so a lot of ID stacks, max ID drains, putting more damage into priority mobs, and things like that. I played Destro for like a pull or so here. It felt a bit chaotic. Obviously, if you pull the boss more and more, you'll get you more used to the fight. It was a very strong Flashpoint Rolling Havoc fight as Destro. Very, very strong. There were typically always multiple targets you could hit with your Flashpoint, or Rolling Havoc early on. A lot of targets to proc Flashpoint off of. We didn't see super late into the fight. So when you probably get later on in the fight, and you're killing the boss at the very end and things, you probably end up losing a good bit of value there. But still, early on, for priority ads, dying, cleave, things like that, heading into the actual phase 2 of the fight, Destro felt really strong here. I'm probably going to start off in this fight playing Affliction. Affliction's build of AC. There's a lot of merit to playing Drain Soul here, because you can shard snipe a lot of ads. The execute is sort of relevant because there are a lot of priority ads you want to kill faster and faster, and then if you're charge sniping as well, you can pump it back into other priority mobs. So I think I'm going to probably give Drain Soul a shot here initially, but I very well might end up just playing Deathbolt regardless. If I do play this fight as AF, like I said, I'm probably going to end up playing AC, unless they actually fix the way the cysts are growing and shrinking in their interaction with Absolute Corruption as a whole.
5, 4.
Alright, boys. We've talked about the 11 previous bosses in Ny'alotha. N'Zoth is indeed the final boss of Ny'alotha, and I personally feel, even though we didn't test the fight a whole lot when it came to PTR, this is like a Flashpoint Rolling Havoc Destruction Warlock's dream. There is so much potential for Flashpoint uptime here. Essentially, whenever your Havoc comes off CD, it's probably going back on CD. There are a lot of ads, a lot of tentacles, a lot of priority mobs, a lot of high health mobs that are probably going to be ignored by most of the most of the raid where you can proc Flashpoint and keep it up rolling on. It's a very strong Destro fight. I don't think AF is bad here either. I played it for initial testing on PTR, but it just felt like, with there being so many ads, things that need to die, or just potential ads to dot and generate resources off of, it felt like I was almost GCD capped as far as AF goes. I'm trying to apply Agony and Corruption to 2 ads across the room, which you can't hit with a Seed because there's only 2 mobs. You'd rather cast your Corruption. And over here as well, you're trying to multi-dot everything. It's just like, you'd be more valuable in a raid playing Destruction with Flashpoint Rolling Havoc potentially. Phase 1 with the Psychus ad, even though you're going downstairs to burn the Psychus ad down as a priority mob, and even though the raid is killing a tentacle 1 by 1, you can typically put a Havoc on a tentacle the raid's not going to kill, or one down the line, and cleave onto the current tentacle and the one after the current one to get Rolling Havoc value there. You can put like immolate on a random tentacle off to the side to proc Flashpoint and refresh it, as well as putting on the Psychus ad, because it's not going to take a lot of damage until you start focusing it down as a raid. Phase 2, you go back down for the Psychus ad later on, but there's a lot of tentacles upstairs, mobs you can proc Flashpoint off of. It's just a really strong Destro fight, I feel, toolkit-wise. When I played AF in this fight, I played initially our single target build, then I played AC. I felt AC was probably a bit better, what we saw Phase 1, Phase 2, back and forth. But I just feel Destro is where we're probably going to want to be on this fight. If you're playing Affliction, ID is strong, multiple targets, a lot of ID drains, things like that. The Psychus ad does take increased damage downstairs, so I mean, hey, big drain, big damage, increased damage, there you go. As far as Demo goes in this fight, there's a lot of movement on this fight, a lot going on. Demo's toolkit, I felt personally that Demo's toolkit, from what I saw, didn't really bring a whole lot to this fight. There's multiple times in the fight where you're trying to kill 2 ads at once. Havoc just insane there. Even in the same sense, AF with spread dot cleave is insane. Demo just didn't really bring a whole lot as far as what I see and thought as far as like PTR testing goes. It doesn't bring a whole lot. We didn't see a whole lot of Phase 3, and if there is indeed a Mythic Phase, we don't really know a whole lot about that. But even if, like, this fight is just such a strong Destro fight, I feel, I certainly want to start off playing Destro here with a Flashpoint Rolling Havoc build, with 1 crashing trait, obviously, and going from there. It'll be Destro's single target build as far as talents go, but azerite traits will be, you know, Flashpoint Rolling Havoc, things like that. If I was going to play Affliction here, once again, we don't know a whole lot about the final phase and things like that. I wouldn't hate playing Absolute Corruption AF here, with the potential of playing Drain Soul due to the shard sniping, execute damage, priority damage, things like that. Which there are a lot of ads that either die pretty quickly. Execute base damage is strong there. I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up starting off with Drain Soul here, at least giving it a shot. Obviously, Death Bolt is our best single target talent, but Drain Soul is a solid choice here. Could be a solid choice here.
Looks like it's toward the boss.
Thanks for watching, guys. Sorry for the video being a bit longer than most, but I wanted to try and cover each fight from a few different angles and perspectives. I hope it gave you all a better look at what I think Warlock will be like in Ny'alotha and what builds we'll end up seeing play. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll see y'all again soon. Peace.